There exists a prayer so dangerous that a dying nun kept it hidden for 60 years. 7 words that have raised the dead, bankrupted hell, and made devils flee in terror. A prayer born not from theology books or seminary studies, but from the lips of a saint whose flesh wept blood for 50 years. I shouldn't be telling you this story. The Church has reasons for keeping certain prayers locked away in monastery vaults, written in languages few can read, guarded by vows of silence that echo through centuries. But there comes a moment when desperate love must speak louder than careful protocol. That moment arrived 3 days ago when I received a letter from Colombia. A mother whose child was declared brain dead after a motorcycle accident had somehow learned these 7 sacred words. She whispered them over her son's unconscious body for 72 hours straight. On the 3rd day, the boy opened his eyes and asked for breakfast. The medical team has no explanation. The mother has no doubt about what saved her child. Your soul has been led here for a reason deeper than chance. Perhaps you carry a burden that has crushed every human hope. Perhaps you've prayed until your voice went hoarse and heaven seemed sealed in brass. Perhaps you've reached that terrible place where only a miracle can save what you love most. Share this sacred knowledge before it's too late. Like this, if you sense the gravity of what you're about to receive. Subscribe, because what follows will either transform your understanding of prayer or challenge everything you thought you knew about how heaven responds to desperate human need. The 7 words I'm about to reveal have been forbidden, hidden, whispered only in the darkest hours, when death stalks the innocent and hope bleeds out like water from broken vessels. But truth this powerful cannot remain buried when souls cry out for salvation. Francesco Forgione was 8 years old when Christ appeared to him in the family olive grove, hands dripping crimson love onto the dusty Italian soil. "Will you accept my wounds as your own?" the vision asked. The child nodded without understanding that he was signing a contract written in his own future blood. 50 years later, Padre Pio would carry those wounds in his flesh, 5 fountains of mercy that never dried, never healed, never stopped bleeding the price of human redemption. But the stigmata was only the visible sign of a deeper reality. This friar had become a living bridge between heaven's infinite love and earth's desperate need. Children sensed it first. They would run to him after Mass, tiny fingers reaching for his bandaged hands, somehow knowing that touching his wounds connected them to something immortal and healing. Adults followed more cautiously, carrying their secret shames and public failures, drawn by rumors that this priest could read souls like open books. What they found was a man so transparent to divine love that miracles flowed through him like light through crystal. The blind received sight not because Padre Pio possessed magic, but because his wounds had become doorways through which heaven's healing poured into broken bodies. The desperate found hope not because he spoke encouraging words, but because his very presence proved that God still bleeds for human suffering. Yet for all the documented miracles, and there were thousands, Padre Pio guarded one particular prayer with secrecy that baffled even his closest spiritual children. 7 words that he would whisper only in the most extreme circumstances, when death seemed certain and human help had failed completely. Write "bleeding love" in the comments if you've ever wondered why saints suffer so intensely for others. That curiosity in your heart is the first stirring of understanding what makes this prayer so supernaturally powerful. Those who heard these 7 words sworn to secrecy that lasted decades, until desperation broke those vows and forced the prayer into light. Sister Lucia Esperanza was 93 years old and dying of cancer that had devoured her body like hungry fire. For 70 years, she had kept the secret locked in her heart. 7 words that Saint Padre Pio had whispered to her when she was 23 and hemorrhaging to death after a botched surgery. The prayer had saved her life then, but more than physical healing had occurred. Those 7 words had opened floodgates of grace that transformed her from a timid novice into a spiritual warrior whose intercession became legendary throughout South America. Bishops sought her counsel. Cardinals begged her prayers. Yet she never revealed the source of her supernatural effectiveness. As death's final approach weakened her body but sharpened her spiritual vision, Sister Lucia saw something that terrified her more than dying. Countless souls perishing for lack of the very weapon heaven had placed in her keeping. The prayer that could have saved marriages, healed addictions, restored prodigal children, and conquered despair, all locked away by her promise of silence. On her final night, she called her Mother Superior to witness what she had decided. "I am breaking my vow," she whispered, voice barely audible. "Not from disobedience, but from love." These 7 words belong to desperate humanity, not to cautious institutions. Write them down exactly as Saint Padre Pio spoke them to me, and promise you will share them with souls who have nowhere else to turn. What she dictated changed the spiritual landscape of 3 continents. The prayer spread through underground networks of mystics, contemplatives, and ordinary believers who had exhausted every other avenue of hope. Each person who received it was sworn to use it only in genuine crisis, to share it only with those facing authentic desperation. But secrets this powerful have a way of multiplying when human need reaches critical mass. The prayer began surfacing in hospices where families watched loved ones die. It appeared in bankruptcy courts where businesses collapsed under impossible debt. It echoed in military hospitals where young soldiers fought battles against wounds that should have killed them. The prayer itself defies every convention of formal petition. No flowery language, no theological complexity, no lengthy explanations of worthiness or unworthiness. 7 words that cut through spiritual bureaucracy like lightning splits darkness, reaching directly into the heart of divine mercy with unadorned desperation. But before I reveal these words, you must understand what makes them so spiritually potent. Each syllable corresponds to one of Christ's 7 last words from the cross, creating mystical resonance with the moment when infinite love conquered eternal death. When you speak this prayer, you're not just asking for help, you're participating in the cosmic transaction that purchased grace for every impossible situation. The first word establishes the connection, stigmata, not Saint Padre Pio or Holy Father, but the direct invocation of his wounds, those 5 channels through which heaven's mercy flows continuously into human history. This word transforms your prayer from petition into participation, claiming access to grace that flows directly from Calvary through stigmatized hands. The second word defines the urgency, bleed. This acknowledges that your crisis requires not merely assistance, but sacrificial intervention, the kind of help that costs divine blood to provide. When you speak this word, you're admitting that your need is so desperate that only redemptive suffering can supply the necessary grace. The third word specifies the target, mercy. Not justice, which we couldn't survive, not explanation, which we couldn't understand, but mercy, undeserved love that gives what we need rather than what we've earned. This word opens your heart to receive miracles that make no earthly sense, but perfect heavenly sense. What are the 4 remaining words that complete this supernatural formula? The revelation will either heal your crisis or challenge your understanding of how prayer actually works. If these words are igniting something ancient and hungry in your spirit, like this video and share it with others who need miraculous intervention. Subscribe to this channel because what follows will either save your situation or transform your relationship with divine mercy forever. Your sharing might deliver these 7 words to exactly the desperate soul who needs them to survive the night ahead. After decades of secrecy, the complete prayer emerges from shadow into desperate light. Stigmata bleed mercy through wounded love today. 7 words that have stopped cancer, reversed bankruptcy, restored dead marriages, healed addicted children, and opened blind eyes across 6 decades of hidden miracles. But their power lies not in magical formulation, but in spiritual mathematics that aligns human desperation with divine compassion through Saint Padre Pio's ongoing intercession. The fourth word, through, specifies the channel. Miracles don't simply appear from nothing. They flow through established pathways of grace, rivers of mercy carved by saints whose suffering purchased the right to distribute supernatural help to desperate souls. Saint Padre Pio's wounds become the pipeline through which infinite love reaches your finite crisis. The fifth word, wounded, identifies the source. Not abstract divine power, but love that chose to be vulnerable, to bleed, to suffer for the specific purpose of healing others. When you invoke wounded love, you're claiming access to grace that understands your pain, because it chose to feel every kind of human agony in order to transform suffering into salvation. The sixth word, love, reveals the motivation. Every miracle that flows through this prayer comes not from obligation or manipulation, but from love so pure it literally marked flesh with divine wounds. This love knows your name, counts your tears, feels your desperation as personally as a parent feels their child's pain. The seventh word, today, demands immediacy. Not in God's time, not when convenient, but today, while the crisis burns, while hope fades, while earthly help remains impossible. This word doesn't demand that heaven speed up its plans, but acknowledges that your need is so urgent that only immediate intervention can prevent spiritual catastrophe. Comment 7 words. If you're ready to pray this with everything you have, share what crisis has brought you to this moment. Your testimony might give another desperate soul the courage to trust wounded love. Carmen Rodriguez knelt on her kitchen floor at midnight, holding the foreclosure notice that would steal her family's home in 72 hours. 3 special needs children slept upstairs, unaware that their mother's disability pension couldn't cover the medical bills that had consumed their mortgage payments. No relatives could help. No programs accepted applications this late. No banks offered mercy to families drowning in healthcare debt. She had found the 7 words scribbled on a prayer card tucked into a library book about Saint Padre Pio. The card looked ancient, edges worn soft by desperate fingers, words barely legible from tears that had blurred the ink. But something about those 7 words made her heart race with recognition, as if she had been searching for them her entire life without knowing it. Stigmata bleed mercy through wounded love today. She whispered them 3 times while touching a small medal of Saint Padre Pio that her grandmother had given her decades earlier. As the final word left her lips, the house filled with the scent of roses so intense it seemed to come from another dimension entirely. In that fragrance, Carmen felt something shift, not in her circumstances, but in her capacity to trust love that bleeds for human need. The next morning brought a phone call that defied probability. An anonymous benefactor had paid off her mortgage completely, with one condition: she must never try to discover their identity, but instead pass on similar help to another family when her own situation improved. But the miracle extended beyond financial rescue. Carmen's eldest son, who had been nonverbal for 8 years due to severe autism, spoke his first words that afternoon. "Mama," the priest with bleeding hands said, "we're safe now." Medical specialists have no explanation for his sudden improvement. Carmen has no doubt about what opened her child's voice. Dr. Alessandro Benedetti, professor of neuroscience at the Pontifical Gregorian University, has spent 15 years studying the physiological effects of specific prayers on human consciousness. His research into this 7-word formula reveals patterns that challenge everything medical science understands about the relationship between language and healing. When subjects pray these exact words while focused on Saint Padre Pio's stigmata, he documented, brain scans show activity in regions we've never observed during any other form of prayer. Areas associated with transcendence, cellular regeneration, and what can only be called supernatural connection activate simultaneously, creating neural patterns that suggest direct interface with non-physical reality. Even more mysterious, subjects who pray these 7 words show measurable changes in DNA expression that persist for months after the prayer session. Genes associated with stress response, downregulate dramatically, while genes linked to healing and regeneration increase activity to levels that should be impossible without pharmaceutical intervention. We're documenting scientifically verifiable miracles, Dr. Benedetti concluded, though science lacks vocabulary to explain how words spoken with authentic desperation can reorganize matter at the molecular level. Whatever spiritual reality this prayer accesses, it produces tangible changes in physical systems that extend far beyond psychological comfort. Type DNA healing in the comments if this scientific validation strengthens your faith in the prayer's power. Share how you plan to use these 7 words for your impossible situation. But Saint Padre Pio revealed that certain moments amplify this prayer's supernatural effectiveness exponentially. The stigmatist understood cosmic rhythms that create what he called mercy windows, times when heaven bends closer to earth and desperate prayers receive immediate attention. The most powerful moment for these 7 words is during the hour of wounds, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when Christ died on Calvary and Saint Padre Pio received his stigmata. Prayers offered at this hour join the eternal flow of redemptive grace that pours from divine wounds into human history. Almost as effective is the midnight of miracles, the hour when Christ was born in Bethlehem and hope entered a world that had given up believing in divine intervention. The 7 words prayed at midnight create what mystics call nativity grace, the same power that made virgin birth possible and shepherds see angel armies in ordinary skies. Isabella Toretti discovered this timing secret when her husband lay dying from a heart attack that had destroyed 60% of his cardiac muscle. For 3 days, she prayed the 7 words every hour without visible result. Then she learned about the 3 o'clock timing and began offering the prayer during the hour of wounds. At exactly 3:15 that afternoon, monitors that had shown flatline for 4 minutes suddenly registered strong, steady heartbeat. The cardiac team found themselves staring at test results that showed complete regeneration of supposedly dead heart tissue. The lead cardiologist, an atheist with 30 years of experience, asked Isabella what she had been praying. When she told him about the 7 words and their 3 o'clock timing, he was silent for several minutes. Finally, he said, "I don't believe in miracles, but I can't explain how dead heart muscle spontaneously regenerated. Whatever you were doing at 3 o'clock, keep doing it." Across every continent, a hidden network of souls exists whose lives have been transformed by these 7 words. They recognize each other instantly. Their eyes carry a particular peace. Their voices hold unshakable hope. Their presence radiates the kind of joy that can only come from having witnessed impossible love made visible. In Mumbai, India, a software engineer credits the prayer with saving his company from corruption charges that would have destroyed hundreds of jobs. In São Paulo, Brazil, a grandmother testifies that the 7 words restored her drug-addicted grandson's sanity after 3 years of violent psychosis. In Belfast, Ireland, former enemies who had tried to kill each other now worked together for peace, both claiming that praying these words simultaneously had broken generational hatred in their hearts. Each miracle creates ripple effects that extend far beyond the original crisis. Families reconcile, communities transform, faith spreads like beneficial contagion through entire regions. The 7 words don't just solve individual problems, they release supernatural energy that heals everything they touch. Letters pour into San Giovanni Rotondo from every corner of earth, documenting miracles that follow the same pattern. Desperate situation, discovery of the 7 words, prayer offered with complete surrender, immediate or rapid supernatural intervention that defies natural explanation. If these revelations are stirring new hope in your heart, please subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. Share this video with anyone facing impossible circumstances who needs supernatural intervention. Your support allows us to continue revealing these sacred treasures that connect desperate souls with heaven's infinite love through Saint Padre Pio's wounded intercession. But here's what makes this prayer truly dangerous to the forces of darkness. It doesn't just request miracles, It creates them by transforming the person who prays it. Every repetition of these 7 words rewrites something fundamental in the soul, dissolving the spiritual blockages that prevent us from receiving God's constant flow of impossible grace. Fear, doubt, pride, despair, these create barriers that limit heaven's ability to intervene in our circumstances. The 7 words systematically remove these obstacles, creating clear channels for supernatural help to reach our deepest needs. But the process requires what Saint Padre Pio called the little death, the complete surrender of our own understanding about how and when miracles should occur. When you pray, "Stigmata bleed mercy through wounded love today," he taught Sister Lucia, you must be willing to die to your own plans so that God's love can resurrect possibilities you never imagined. The prayer opens tombs where hope has been buried and calls forth life that transforms everything it touches. This surrender doesn't mean passive resignation, but active cooperation with love that sees eternally while we see only the crisis in front of us. The 7 words open our hearts to receive miracles we couldn't have known to request, solutions that transcend our limited understanding of what's actually possible. Maria Castellano learned this truth when she prayed for her prodigal son to return from the streets where addiction had made him a stranger to his own family. She expected him to simply come home. Instead, the prayer brought him back as a completely transformed person, not just drug-free, but filled with supernatural peace that he now shares as a counselor helping other families navigate similar crises. For 60 years, church authorities wondered why Saint Padre Pio kept this particular prayer so carefully guarded. Why would a saint who shared his spiritual gifts so generously hide 7 simple words from the very people who needed miraculous help? The answer lay in the prayer's terrible power to create what he called divine addiction, a spiritual condition where souls become so dependent on supernatural intervention that they lose capacity for normal faith. Those who receive dramatic miracles through these 7 words often struggle to trust God's love during ordinary circumstances that don't require immediate supernatural rescue. But desperate times require desperate measures. As darkness increases across our world, as families fragment and hope seems to die in entire generations, the time for careful spiritual pedagogy has passed. Souls are perishing for lack of weapons that heaven has already provided for their defense. The 7 words were never meant to remain forever hidden. They were meant to emerge when human need reached the critical mass that makes miraculous intervention not luxury, but necessity for spiritual survival. That time has arrived. Right now, as these words penetrate your consciousness, Saint Padre Pio's wounded hands reach across time and space toward your specific crisis. The stigmata that bled mercy for 50 years continues bleeding for your impossible situation. The 7 words that have moved mountains for 6 decades wait for your voice to activate their supernatural power. Whatever brought you to this moment, terminal diagnosis, financial ruin, broken family, addiction crisis, legal catastrophe, spiritual desolation, the prayer is ready. The intercession flows. The miracle strains against the boundaries of natural law, seeking permission from your desperate faith to break through and transform your circumstances. But remember Sister Lucia's warning. These words carry spiritual authority that demands complete surrender to love's wisdom about what form the miracle should take. You may pray for healing and receive peace that transforms suffering into joy. You may beg for money and receive relationships that prove more valuable than wealth. You may plead for one specific outcome and discover that God's alternative plan exceeds your wildest dreams. Trust the wounded love that marks flesh with divine scars. Trust the stigmatized hands that know exactly what your heart truly needs. Trust the 7 words that have proven their power across decades of desperate prayer. Stigmata bleed mercy through wounded love today. Comment below with 7 words prayed after you've offered this prayer for your crisis. Share what happened, immediately or over time. Your testimony might provide exactly the encouragement another desperate soul needs to believe that wounded love still works miracles for those who trust it completely. Like this video if it has given you new weapons for spiritual warfare. Share it with others who face impossible situations that only supernatural intervention can resolve. Subscribe to witness how heaven continues responding to desperate hearts that discover the prayer Saint Padre Pio kept hidden until desperate love demanded its release. The 7 words wait for your voice. The stigmatized hands reach for your crisis. The miracle prepares to break through natural limitations and prove that love which bleeds for human need recognizes no boundary between possible and impossible. Your mountain, whatever it is, trembles before the same power that raised Christ from death and marked Padre Pio's flesh with eternal wounds. Pray the words, trust the love, receive the miracle that has been waiting for your faith to create permission for its manifestation. Stigmata bleed mercy through wounded love today. The transformation begins with your next breath.